I'm Roy Lee Lindsay with the North Carolina Pork Council, and I want everyone to remember bacon makes everything better.
Welcome back into Timeout here on the North Carolina Sports Network. I am Mike Waddell, former Division I Athletics Director. In the top left, it is Kerry Keating, the former head coach at Santa Clara and multi-stop Power Conference assistant coach. And then the standby, the veteran of more than 38 years of covering ACC basketball. We're talking about the award-winning author, journalist, entrepreneur, and the co-creator of the North Carolina Sports Network, the one and the only David Glenn. Right here again, everybody. I tell you, college basketball season, even though the college football playoff has taken a lot of headlines, boy, there's some great basketball out there, at least some great finishes to these games.
Yeah, Mike, I'm with you. And we saw an example of that right here in our backyard not too long ago. NC State desperately needed to defend its home court against rival North Carolina team that's had its own struggles. But the Tar Heels needed that win as well. And, of course, only one team can get it. Sure enough, as we probably would have predicted, it went down to become one of those fantastic finishes, if you want to call it that. Probably Tar Heel fans would use that phrase more than Wolfpack fans would. But Ian Jackson continues to just blossom as a freshman for the Tar Heels. Jalen Washington came up with that huge blocked shot. And yes, that's what it was, a huge blocked shot, and even recovered the blocked shot in those final seconds to preserve the 2-point Carolina victory. A lot of these ACC games moving forward are probably going to be similarly played. And we know the ACC is down, but that doesn't mean we might not have a half a dozen ACC teams that are trying to build NCAA tournament caliber resumes. If you end up close to the bubble, of course, a lot of these nail biters, getting them to go your way can sometimes be the difference between the right and the wrong side of the bubble on Selection Sunday.
I equate these to what we used to call rock fights. We're going to see a lot of rock fights in the ACC as we move forward. Rock fights are jagged. They're not smooth. They're kind of random. There isn't a lot of smooth and smooth sailing in the ACC right now for a lot of the schools. And I thought that game on Saturday was very indicative of that. Two teams trying to find their way in their own respective rights. Not a really pretty game. You know, it was ugly early. I think only 21 points for State, and a team that scores 80 a game in the first half. It seemed to go faster in the second half. But I think David hit the nail on the head. I mean, Ian Jackson really, shown his star brightly when it was needed the most in a game that really, if you didn't know any better, you wouldn't know RJ Davis was even on the team, which is just amazing to me as I sat and watched that game in totality and tried to watch both teams and dissect it. Not a lot of flow to it. As we talked about last year, not really one player on State dominating the entire game. I think you had some early action, from their guards, but I still often wonder what's going to come of Carolina's season. I know we talked about last year. We think they're going to make the NCAA tournament, and they had to get this game. We talked about this next 2 weeks for the Big Four here in the North Carolina state of North Carolina ACC. Carolina had to win that game. State had to win that game. Someone had to come out on top. Someone had to lose. But I think what you're going to see are a lot more of these very close, hard-fought rock fight type games where it's not going to be a blowout. There may be some unexpected wins and maybe some unexpected losses. The only team that really seems to be establishing himself as a potential number 1 or 2 seed coming out of the ACC obviously is Duke, and we'll get into that here shortly with Cooper Flagg doing his best Leighton Ferry invitation. I'm just really concerned if I'm a Carolina fan right now, even though they came out with the win. Outside of Ian Jackson, obviously the big block and score by Washington late, I still think there's a lot of work for Carolina to do to put themselves in the postseason when all is said and done come March.
So Carolina gets the win 63-61 over State. As we talked about or mentioned there a second ago, Duke, an 86-78 win over Notre Dame. We're going to talk about both of those games in depth. We're also going to go inside this ACC college basketball season. We're right at the midseason point. We're going to talk about the coaches who are most worthy of our Midseason ACC Coach of the Year award. And we're also going to go to both David Glenn and Kerry Keating and get their 5 top players in the ACC for their Midseason All-ACC grouc. Then we're going to have some fun things to talk about towards the end of the show, including one thing that was simply amazing over the weekend that transpired in ACC women's basketball. That's all coming up next right here as you're tuned in to Timeout all across the bold North State on the North Carolina Sports Network.
In sports, we talk a lot about impact players who make a positive difference. When it comes to our state's economy, the North Carolina pork industry is a true MVP. Each year, the pork industry plays an important role in supporting rural communities across our state. It contributes more than $10 billion a year to the North Carolina economy and supports more than 44,000 jobs. Learn more about their positive impact at ncpork.org. The North Carolina Pork Council, the foundational partner of the North Carolina Sports Network.
Behind another spectacular performance from superstar freshman Cooper Flagg, the 4th-ranked Duke Blue Devils improved to 14-2 over the weekend with an 86-78 win over Notre Dame at Cameron Indoor Stadium. I'm Mike Waddell. That's Dave Glenn. He's Coach Kerry Keating, and this is Timeout on the North Carolina Sports Network. And gentlemen, Duke has been the top team in the ACC going into this campaign, and now as we're at the midway point, this team just keeps getting better, and Cooper Flagg really found his stride. 42 points, an ACC freshman record, David Glenn. That's something that even in all of your experience in covering the Atlantic Coast Conference, you've never seen a freshman score that much.
That is true, Mike, and there's some other things I've never seen as well, including, I'm still researching this, but I can't find a player who led his team for an entire season in the 5 big categories of course, points and rebounds and assists and block shots and steals. Now, there's a long way to go for Cooper Flagg, but even as we can celebrate that Duke win over Notre Dame and Flagg's central role to it, 42 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, he was 11 for 14 from the field. So you can't say that he's just some high volume, low efficiency guy. 11 for 14 for the field and 16 for 17 from the free throw line, 4 out of 6 from three-point land where he has not been great. That is about as efficient and as productive as it gets in combination. But as we speak, and of course things can change, we're only at that midway point you just mentioned. But Cooper Flagg's absolutely going to lead the Devils in points. He's absolutely going to lead them in rebounds. He's almost certainly going to lead them in assists. That sounds strange because he's a 6'9" forward, but he's essentially a point forward, and he's well above all the Duke guards in terms of their total assists so far this season. The only things that he might get surpassed in are steals, where Malik Brown, who Coach Keating has described as one of the best defensive players in this league, and I agree. Malik Brown is at least close to Cooper Flagg in steals. The big fella, Common Malawach, is close to Cooper Flagg in blocked shots. So there's a chance one of those 2 categories kind of gets away from Flagg in terms of the full season. We'll have to count it all up at the end. But we're talking about once-in-a-generation type combination of skills and statistics here. Again, I'm still researching it, but I haven't found one in the history of the ACC that led his team in all 5 of those categories for the full season. Cooper Flagg might do it. Cooper Flagg is doing it as we speak. And Cooper Flagg obviously was the runaway MVP of an 86-78 win over Notre Dame, where I give the Fighting Irish a lot of credit because they're not the most talented team. They're not deep at all. But man, did they put up a great fight in front of the Cameron Crazies. And it's a credit to Micah Shrewsbury and his starting lineup that a middling ACC team pushed the Blue Devils as far as they did. They just didn't have an answer to Cooper Flagg, and most teams won't.
They tried, from a coaching perspective, a lot of different avenues to go down and try to stop Cooper Flagg and the Devils. Changed defenses. At one point, they were in a triangle and two. They were talking about doubling him. They were going to play him straight up. I think from John Shire's standpoint, the thing you have to really be happy about is this is now the second game, the first being the Auburn game, where Cooper Flagg shot double-digit free throws. I think a really good indicator of a really talented player who doesn't press too much, especially a guy this young and this talented, is how many free throws he takes in big games. And this is obviously a big game from the standpoint that he put up 42, and the efficiency speaks for itself. But 16 for 17 from the free throw line. The 7 assists really stick out to me. When a guy puts up 42 in a collegiate game like that, and albeit did play 36 of the minutes, the fact that he could still garner 7 assists in those short rolls when he put himself in a position to be a playmaker and not just the play or the guy making the play really showed a lot of maturity. These last 2 months, the knocking has been, well, he can't shoot the three that well. Well, we all seen this happen before. All of a sudden, you get into these workouts in the spring, and they go into the NBA pre-combine and pre-draft, and the guy's like the greatest shooter ever, including guys that never even shot threes in the NBA in college. Like, all of a sudden, we can shoot threes because what does the NBA do now? Ad nauseum, jack up threes. They want everybody shooting threes, even the guys who can. For him to be able to make the most amount of threes he's made in a game this year and do it in a fashion where he didn't have to shoot 3 times as many, going 4 for 6 from 3, letting all of that come to him, just a model of an efficiency. And I tell you what, if you're the ACC right now and he's starting to get that efficiency going with that roster, and as David mentioned, still having a chance to lead in those 5 categories, whether or not he leads and steals or rebounds at the end of the season, because the volume may come to him with the ball in his hand, being the guy shooting or distributing, it really speaks volumes to what the NBA guys see in him. He mentioned about how he got back in the gym with his dad, and that's how he grew up, kind of that comfort zone of kind of shooting in the gym with his dad. Well, his dad's going to have to start living in Cameron Indoor Stadium here for him to keep shooting that way if they want that to continue. But I have a feeling this is a sign of things to come, and exactly what everybody said was going to happen with Cooper Flagg is now really starting to happen as the season ramps up into the second half. And that's pretty scary if you're an ACC team looking to grab a win later in the season. It may be that only quad win chance you have. We already know how tough it is to win in Cameron. But if he can take that act on the road now and even not score 40, but if he can start to have this efficiency and still lead the team in assists, well, I'd say it's going to be a long road for the ACC heading into March.
Duke is now 14-2 overall with the win over the Irish. A perfect 6-0 in ACC play. Guys, if you're an opposing coach, you have to be excited that Duke isn't just crushing everybody with overwhelming force at this point in the season, as they are undefeated. But if you're an opposing coach, what are you looking at as a potential weakness that you could exploit with this Duke Blue Devils team? What would you do, Kerry, if you were trying to put together a game plan against Duke?
Well, when you play against a guy as dynamic as Cooper Flagg, and obviously he can carry the team from a point standpoint, something that's easier said than done, but has to be attacked early on, is make him defend. Sometimes your best offense is your defense. Your best defense is your offense. You really have to try to put him into positions where he's got to defend your best player or possibly defend your best action to the point where he may not be able to get help from the rest of his teammates by way of a double team or a switch. As we're talking today, it looks like Malik Brown might actually be out with a knee injury that he sustained in that Notre Dame game. This may be a window right now. You have to take advantage of all and every opportunity that may come up by way of personnel available outside of Cooper Flagg that can protect him. Now, that's not to say that Duke needs 42 from Cooper to win all the time, but clearly he's going to be driving that train. You want to try to cut that head off if you can. I think one way to try to do it is take your best offensive output, try to put him in as many positions as he can to defend. And although you don't want to necessarily leave it into the hands of the referees, especially at Cameron Indoor Stadium where they live, you want to make sure that Cooper's put in a position where he's got to make some decisions on the defensive end, because freshmen inevitably and this may be a test to him, freshmen inevitably try to play that mental game. Well, I'll try to get it back playing offense, or I don't want to get into foul trouble. That's the real challenge, to see what level of maturity he has. I think it's one way you might see some teams, because it may not be any other way, really. They may not be as talented or as long or able to outscore them. You got to try to get him off the floor as much as he's on.
Yeah, Mike, one thing I would try to do is limit possessions. You know, Notre Dame is very comfortable playing at a slower tempo, and I think that was one of the reasons that the Fighting Irish stayed in that game. But there aren't a lot of good answers is the bottom line. I mean, for example, when Carolina plays Duke twice later this season, you know Hubert Davis is not going to slow the tempo. That would just defer too far away from what the Tar Heels view as their identity. And Carolina is the fastest tempo team in the ACC. Duke is actually a mid-tempo team this year. So, you know, usually the general theory is if you're that much of an underdog, you limit possessions, because that it increases the percentage chance that you can overcome an opponent that is more talented than you, more efficient than you. But I don't know how many teams are going to be well equipped even to do what Notre Dame did, which in a defeat, I thought played incredibly, admirably well. And they lost by 8 and gave up those record numbers to Cooper Flagg. There are not, I don't believe Duke's going to go 20-0 or 19-1 in conference play. I'll put it this way. There's only once in the last 20 years that the ACC's first place finisher was 4 or more games ahead of the second place finisher. It's hard to create that large of a gap. Duke has a chance to create that large of a gap, whether it's, 18-2 and second place is 14-6 or something similar. We'll see. But I think Duke has a chance to put up those record type team numbers, just as Cooper Flagg is putting up those record individual numbers.
Earlier in the show, we talked about North Carolina's 2-point win at the Lenovo Center on Saturday, 63-61 over NC State. Coming out of this game, everybody's really excited about Jalen Washington, his 11-point, 12-rebound performance. And it just gets to me, guys, that more people aren't talking about Ian Jackson. This true freshman is, in my mind, one of maybe 3 at the most potential pro players on the North Carolina roster right now. I mean, legitimate pros. Guys that are going to see a lot of time on this side of the Atlantic Ocean playing professional basketball. But why isn't Jackson more celebrated with the fans and with the media?
That's a hard question to answer, Mike. It's hard to read people's minds, but I share your appreciation for the guy's game. What I'm interested to hear from Coach is when he watches the Tar Heels play, what does he see in terms of the chemistry among the guards? Because as we've said all season, it's not a well-constructed roster because it lacks the usually reliable, consistent, low-post offensive and defensive big guy. That's not going to change. But what is going to have to change if the Tar Heels are going to get where they want to go is that chemistry among the guards is going to have to improve. It struck me as a little bit odd that when Jalen Washington had that game-saving block shot against the Wolfpack in Raleigh, every player on the team was smiling ear to ear, jumping up and down, chest-bumping Jalen Washington, patting the big fella on the head. In other words, the entire locker room was rallying around him. I don't know if I'm hallucinating, but sometimes when one of the Carolina guards makes a really good pass to another of the Carolina guards, you don't see the same shared joy. There were times in that Wolfpack victory where there was a wonderful pass from somebody among R.J. Davis, the veteran, fifth-year senior, Ian Jackson, of course, a true freshman, Cadeau's a sophomore, Seth Trimble's coming back from injury. One guard passes to another guard in the correct, proper way. The recipient of the pass makes a bucket, and there's not even a finger point the way we've been watching for more than 50 years since Dean Smith's players were doing it back in the 1960s. Now, am I reading between too many lines there, or is there some kind of discomfort? It doesn't have to be dislike. It can just be whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have to be hatred. It doesn't have to be animosity. But I don't see the same joy when guards help guards in some cases, as I saw when a whole bunch of dudes rallied around the lowest maintenance player on the team, and that's how Jalen Washington's personality is described. Is there something there? Is there some kind of weird, Carter and Jamison didn't love sharing the spotlight with, the young Rasheed Wallace and Jerry Stackhouse back in the 1990s? I don't know, but I wonder from a coaching perspective whether you see, Coach, that psychological stuff, or maybe I'm hallucinating, or more X and O stuff where the heels guards have to play better together because, man, they're turning the ball over a lot. What would you expect of a team that's absolutely loaded in the backcourt with Hubert often playing 4 guards? You'd expect fewer turnovers because you have 4 handlers on the court at the same time. And yet in conference play, who has one of the highest rates of turnovers in the entire ACC in conference play? The Tar Heels. Like, some of these things just don't add up, even as we should give credit to Carolina. I mean, they have a nice conference record right now. They still have those wins over UCLA and Dayton. They're in a nice position, not great, but not bad. But that backcourt stuff has to be sorted out, or the Heels aren't going to get where they want to go.
It's amazing, David, to be in this position, having been on the other side of that for over 2 decades. And there's always this chasm between, the coaches and the team, certainly fans, but even astute media members such as yourself that can see these things, because sometimes you can't hide those. And it's hard to acknowledge them as a coach publicly. Now, Hubert's not Mick Cronin. He's not going to air all of his grievances for his team out in public. To each his own. And obviously there's a lot of extenuating circumstances of why coaches choose to do a lot of things they do in the media, whether they like it or not. But some things are hard to hide. And David, watching the game, I just tried to take a very neutral point of view to watch both teams just play, just watch the game. And having seen some other games that are certainly a lot more aesthetically pleasing than that game was. And this is the proverbial eye test, right? Now, if I'm a committee member and I'm watching this game in particular to, feed my eye test, I'm not sure it really passed on either side. But when you look at Carolina, and in the case of just from a statistical standpoint, and even the things that Ian Jackson took 2 threes in front of their bench that we like to say were irrationally confident threes, which is the vernacular for that's a bad shot until it went in.
I see.
Or maybe this is just a guy that is that guy. Maybe he is the guy that needs to be the highlighted shooter on this roster. When you go 5 for 8 from a 3, there aren't a lot of mistakes. You can be hot one day, but there's no question that Jackson is talented. Now you have is RJ in his 7th year now? I mean, you can't even tell you how long RJ's been there for. And now you have a hot shot freshman. Of course, there's going to be some sort of side eye in the locker room. And I think this was something that came up, David, early on when NIL became prevalent. And it was, how is the locker room going to handle this? When one guy's getting X amount, another guy's getting another amount. Well, there's another layer to this, is the NBA level now. And Ian Jackson, all of a sudden the projections start to come out at halfway through the season. And where do you find Ian Jackson? In the lottery. That's a hard pill to swallow. If you're a guy who's a preseason All-American like RJ, and he's a great kid from all accounts. And I have friends who are Archbishop Stepanak alumni who know people that know RJ, the New York connection. And he's a great person from all accounts. I don't know if this is something he can protect from the body language perspective, as you mentioned, David. But there was also, if I look back in the game, really only one time, I think Seth was in the game at the time, where they had a one more, swing for an open 3. And that should be happening all the time when you're playing 4 guards, no matter who you're playing against and what their size is, when you have that amount of talent that Trimble, Cadeau, Jackson, Davis have. You can ask any coach in the country, if you want those 4 guards, there's only maybe a dozen that are saying we're good with ours. The other 350 are like, yeah, we'll take those 4 guys. You can take our guys. We'll side transfer portal this deal today. Like, those are some talented dudes. I know that Hubert knows that. I know they know that. But now you're getting into the management of that. And is the 4-1 record, is it true, or is it just the way the schedule fell? And that's what we're about to find out. And if Jalen Washington becomes the glue guy, and this is kind of where I'm putting it all together, if the eagerness and the joy that they all showed for Jalen making that dunk on it, I think it was I think Cadeau made a great. I think it was Cadeau made that pass, and then obviously the big block shot to secure the game. Maybe that's what they need. They just need a little innocence in that locker room. Just remove all the crap that's going on. Like, remove your agendas. The finger pointing thing was something that was a staple of Dean Smith's program, and then obviously Coach Williams. It's a Carolina thing. We've talked about, hey, is the plus point thing up on the board still? They're still doing that. If they've lost the plus point deal and the finger pointing thing, we got a lot of stuff to clean up here heading into in January and February from a Carolina way. But they still got the talent, albeit a short bench, to keep that 4-1 record intact and stay at the top of the conference.
The irrationally confident 3 has to be my favorite phrase so far of this edition of Timeout. And it reminds me of that point in the game whenever Withers gets the ball, it's like, please don't shoot. But what the heck is Jalen Washington doing shooting 3-pointers?
I think Hubert Davis has come around to your view and my view of Jalen Withers. If you saw the state game, Jalen Withers might have played, I think, 6 minutes or something really small. Was it 4, Coach?
Yep.
Holy cow. I mean, that's probably one of the lowest minute games of his, I think he's one of those 5 or 6 year college players counting his time at Louisville. That is about as scraping bottom as he has been. And, I agree with that assessment because he has not been a smart player. If you're not a smart player by your 5th or 6th year, you're not going to be a smart player. He's not an efficient player. And I'm not saying he's selfish or anything like that. I don't think he's a winning player. And they have to squeeze what they can get out of Jalen Washington. They have to squeeze what they can get out of Van Allen Lubin. I think those are the 2 guys they're more comfortable trying to ride with. They're still not great, those big guys at catching the ball off the pick and roll. I mean, that is an absolute adventure. Defenses are daring Carolina's guards to dump it to the rolling big man. We dare you to try that. And half the time, the big guy fumbles it or can't find an open man or dribbles it off his foot or whatever. And that's not going to do it. But that's where, with this personnel, they just have to keep working on that backcourt chemistry, keep working on those types of pick and roll plays. But to Coach's point, it's about, look at it this way. John Shire, prior to the start of the season, managed all of the potential agendas. Duke hit the ground running with those agendas off to the side. You knew Cooper Flagg was going to be Cooper Flagg. Tyrese Proctor knew he wasn't even going to be the starting point guard anymore. That is a massive blow to a young person's ego. Massive. Caleb Foster's an in-state player who started the season as a starting point guard and now has been demoted to like a 10-minute-a-game guy. That is a massive blow to a prep All-American's ego and how he views his future, and somebody's in his ear talking about how it's going to impact his money down the road. John Shire's handled all of those agenda questions. I think Hubert Davis still has some agenda issues. The good news is, by all accounts, these are good young people. They're not thick-headed, selfish, bad attitude guys. But you got to accept, you can't be mad at Ian Jackson for taking lots of shots and scoring a lot of points when he's being as efficient as he is. Any coach has to be able to have that conversation with any player. I don't care if he's in his 8th year of college. You can't get mad at a freshman for taking lots of shots when he just won the game and he's hitting a high percentage of his shots. If he's shooting 28%, well, yeah, then you have a problem. but he's one of the Heel's most efficient players. Drake Powell's an even better dream freshman in the sense that he's highly efficient, wonderfully versatile, and yet he doesn't need the ball a lot. So that makes chemistry easier, right? There's only one ball for Elliot Cadeau, RJ Davis, Ian Jackson, and Seth Trimble, who have 4 different sets of tools and 4 different proven track records and 4 different sets of strengths and weaknesses. There's a way to maximize that, but man, it just feels like walking on ice at times, trying to make everybody happy.
That's David Glenn. He's Coach Kerry Keating. I'm Mike Waddell. You're tuned in to Time Out here on the North Carolina Sports Network, brought to you in part by the North Carolina Port Council, our foundational partner here on the North Carolina Sports Network, a $10.4 billion industry here in the bold North State, employing over 44,000 of our fellow North Carolinians. Man, North Carolina pork bacon makes everything better. The other thing that makes everything better is when you can hear from David and the coach about their thoughts about the midseason point of the ACC basketball season. We'll do that coming back with our midseason coach of the year and all ACC teams. That comes your way next right here on Time Out and the North Carolina Sports Network.
I am a better person and a more effective business owner for having known and learned from Emily Parks over many years now. Emily's company, Organize for Success, helps multi-passionate business owners and executives bring harmony to all the layers of their lives, from work to side projects, from friends and family to hobbies, community, and beyond. With Emily's help, you too can make every minute matter. She helps you determine what earns your time and how to efficiently accomplish what matters. One of the many things I love about Emily is that she does not impose her will on her clients. She listens to them. That way she can better help them cultivate the lives they want to live. You can set up a complimentary call with Emily today by visiting organizeforsuccess.com. King Neptune Restaurant in Wrightsville Beach is the longest running restaurant in New Hanover County. That's since 1947, and it recently was renovated to an impeccable degree by our good friends Jimmy Galeese and his amazing wife Keating. Their outstanding chefs offer fresh local seafood, salad options, and creative, tasty variations of pork, beef, and poultry dishes. King Neptune has always been a great choice for dinner and or drinks, and now it's open for lunch and brunch too. Check out the lunch, brunch, and dinner menus at neptuneswb.com. That's Neptunes with an S, then WB for Wrightsville Beach. Again, the King Neptune Restaurant website is neptuneswb.com.
First off, if you're going to start your day looking for a great breakfast, look no further than the original Saltworks. Bob Hubbard and the gang cooking up breakfast and lunch to order. It is spectacular. You move from there over to Jimmy's over in Wrightsville Beach. Get your drink on in there. It is the best place every day of the year. Live music right there in downtown Wrightsville Beach. You cannot miss it right there. And then, hey, you go back, you get cleaned up, you come back, maybe get a slushie at Jimmy's, and then you're going over to King Neptune. It's one of the best restaurants in the bold North State. Jimmy Galeese and his amazing wife, Keating, have done an amazing job of breathing new life into the standard of that part of North Carolina. And David Glenn, I know we can't wait to get back down to the coast and maybe take in some Seahawks basketball with UNC Wilmington this year. And that means that we can go to Saltworks, Jimmy's, and King Neptune.
Yeah, Mike, they just had their annual bicycle drive not too long ago as well. For those who don't know, Jimmy and Keaton Galeese, a long time ago, just basically wanted every young person to have access to a bicycle. And what started as a small collection of bicycles just from friends and neighbors bringing over maybe something that the kids who had grown up don't use anymore. It started small, and now it's reached the point where that wonderful family that has that awesome bar, Jimmy's, that awesome restaurant, King Neptune, right next door, They're contributing to the community in more ways than we can count, but they're now generating thousands of bikes, and it's even extended to bicycle safety helmets and other accessories, so that young people whose families may not have the resources to buy such things for themselves, they can now do it with the assistance of this kind of extra arm of the Jimmy Galeese and Keating Galeese empire down there. So, my wife Maria and I got engaged in Wilmington, married in Wrightsville Beach, vacation there. I've been an adjunct professor at UNC Wilmington. It is truly my home away from home. And when it comes to those other things, Jimmy's and the original Saltworks and King Neptune, they have also become homes away from homes, my home, in different ways.
Well, certainly our home for college basketball is the Atlantic Coast Conference here on the North Carolina Sports Network. David Glenn, you've been covering ACC basketball for 38 years. Kerry Keating, you've coached in the ACC, also been a head coach. You've been all around the nation on the sidelines. So who better than you two to give us your mid-season point ACC Coaches of the Year candidates? David, let's start out with you.
Yeah, well, I know who usually wins this award. And the way it usually goes is people look at the preseason media predictions, and then whatever team finished more slots higher than what they were predicted to finish, that coach gets the honor. I'm not saying that's not one thing we should all consider, but I think it places too much weight on what the media voted back in the preseason. I kind of take a more holistic view of the whole thing. And here are my two top candidates right now. One would be more conventional than the other. Pat Kelsey of Louisville deserves a lot of credit because he took over at a prestigious program, Louisville, multiple national champions in men's basketball, of course, historically. But the Cardinals had two of the worst seasons in the history of the program in the immediate past, prior to his hiring away from the College of Charleston. Pat Kelsey had an entire roster turnover. Not 5 players leaving, not 6, not 7. 13 scholarship players out, 13 scholarship players in. He essentially has been asked to microwave a basketball team, and that is what he has done. They have role players like Rain Smith, a guy who followed him from College of Charleston, is one of the best three-point shooters in the ACC. They got a 3-year starter from Wisconsin named Chucky Hepburn to be their starting point guard. And I watched him play for the Badgers. What Pat Kelsey has Chucky Hepburn doing has brought out the best. He was good for the Badgers. He is great for the Cardinals. When you can microwave a basketball team and get all these guys, many of whom were stars at their previous school. Not all of them, but many of them were the guy at their previous college, as he had to restock his roster with all major college transfers. When you have to ask 6 or 7 the guys, you have to ask most of them, if not all of them, to just blend in. And you do it successfully to the point that here at midseason, Louisville is 12-5 overall, 5-1 in the ACC, second place in the conference standings. They beat Indiana earlier this year. They beat West Virginia in non-conference play. They beat Carolina convincingly in Louisville earlier this year. They beat the Clemson Tigers. They beat Pitt. Other than Duke, 3 of the best teams in this league are Carolina, Clemson, and Pitt. And Louisville has gone 3-0 against that group so far. So given what he inherited, given the massive turnover, given the positive chemistry, off the charts positive chemistry Pat Kelsey has helped cultivate, and given that he's going to finish high in the standings after being picked middle, I think, in the standings. I'd have to double check the exact number. Middle third, I would guess. Pat Kelsey is one of the leading candidates for ACC Coach of the Year. I'll be briefer on the second one because I mentioned a lot of this earlier. This is the more unconventional one. How many times did either Dean Smith or Mike Krzyzewski or Roy Williams, or one of the greatest coaches of our time, have an insanely good team and an insanely good season, and they were ignored in the Coach of the Year balloting, and it was always on the logic, well, they have the most talent. They should win, right? Well, there's a difference between winning because you have the most talent and then reaching a point of dominance or one of these historic records And we're only at the midseason point, so I'm not ready to crown anybody yet. But Duke deserves credit, and Jon Scheyer deserves credit beyond the fact that he had another #1 recruiting class, beyond the fact that he's going to have the National Freshman of the Year in Cooper Flagg and the ACC Player of the Year in Cooper Flagg. They're 6-0 in conference play. They're 14-2 overall. Their only losses were to really good teams, Kentucky and Kansas, that are going to end up, high in the national rankings. They're playing some of the best defense in the entire country. What do you often hear? It's hard to play great team defense, especially with freshmen, because most freshmen weren't taught very well at their previous level. Well, Duke is elite defensively with the help of a lot of freshmen in the rotation. Duke is also elite offensively. They're the only ACC team and one of the few nationally that's in the top 10 of the offensive efficiency rankings and the top 10 of the defensive efficiency rankings. Those are just some of the numeric reasons. Earlier in the show, I mentioned the emotional, the psychological, the agenda-driven reasons. Jon Scheyer is tremendously respected by those players. And when Jon Scheyer tells Tyrese Proctor he's not going to be the starting point guard anymore, Tyrese Proctor accepted it and has improved his outside shooting and is helping in other ways. He demoted Caleb Foster. He convinced Malik Brown of Syracuse to transfer in, even though Malik knew he would have a secondary role. He convinced Sion James to transfer in from Tulane, where Sion was the man, capital letters, the man, and he has to be a secondary player. Why? Because Cooper Flagg is there, and Kamen Malawach is there, and Con Knippel is there. And if you're going to come to Duke, you've got to be ready to be a supplementary, complementary player rather than the superstar that you were at Tulane or Syracuse or wherever. Mason Gillis of Purdue in a different way. I think Jon Scheyer on the court has gotten maximum effort. Jon Scheyer on the court already has the Devils hitting on all cylinders offensively and defensively, which is hard at midseason, especially when you have so many new guys and so many young guys. Again, Jon Scheyer probably won't win ACC Coach of the Year because he was picked to finish first, and you can't finish higher than first. But I think if the guy goes, 18-2 in the ACC, given everything I just described, X and O wise, effort wise, results wise, agenda management wise, I think he, along with Pat Kelsey, which should be at least at midseason here, the top two candidates for ACC Coach of the Year.
Well said, David. No arguments at all. Nothing really to add to that thoroughness other than in the midseason, if we're just going to throw another third party, if you will, into the vote here, just go down the standings and add Brad Brownell. And simply from the fact that he had a team in the Elite Eight last year, not a traditional basketball powerhouse, if you will, not the Duke Carolinas of the world, not even the Louisvilles of the world, and right back in with only one loss in the league, albeit to Louisville. Brad's one of those guys that every year up until last year, everyone in the coaching circles thought, well, he won't be there anymore. And here he is in his 15th year at Clemson. Now with the moving on of a lot of coaches in the league, the elder statesman of the league, if you will, and doing what he needs to do by winning. And although winning more of his games at home than on the road, obviously, by way of percentage, a team that has certainly put himself right in the squirrely of the NCAA mix as we head into the mid-January point to decide who's going to have a chance to be there. And Brad has certainly done that. And kudos to Brad for, coming over the top and being one game away from a Final Four. I mean, that's a hard act to follow at a school that's traditionally not there every year. I think Brad deserves a little bit of mention, although very, very difficult to get a mention with those two guys for all the reasons you pointed out, David. Rightfully so for both Pat and for John. We'll see if it holds up. We'll see in a month or two if it holds up, but I have a feeling that we'll be kind of having the same conversation once we come around to the end of the season, once the ACC tournament pops up.
It's funny. Brad was the other guy on my mind, so I'm glad I didn't steal all your thunder, Coach. I appreciate that.
It's not a lot to choose from, so we gotta share the wealth here. But I appreciate you laying it out so eloquently. And we talked about this too, just to come over the top a little bit on John. And I know having been on Coach of the Year staffs before as an assistant, you know how much you put into making that coach successful. And I know when coaches get Coach of the Year awards, that's a staff award. The interesting thing to me, and it can't be overstated with how John has handled this talent inflection, both with the freshmen and the transfer class and doing it at a high level, is the non-basketball staff that they have, which in this day and age is going to become so much more relevant, so much more important to success. It's going to require relationship management of a different level. Anytime you follow a legend or someone that has their name on the floor, even, that's usually the buffer for the next guy. It happened at Arizona, it happened at UCLA. We can go on and on. This speaks volumes to obviously what Coach K built and instilled. And it wasn't necessarily a Bill Guthridge type buffer, if you will, at Carolina. But clearly they knew something. Clearly John knows something. I remember recruiting John as a high school player when I was, I think, at Tennessee at the time. He was a high school player up in Chicago and Illinois. Not a surprise, but really, really impressive how he's managed this team while also coaching it. And that's exactly what coaches are going to have to become moving forward. Not just game coaches, but people managers of the highest standard outside of your roster, because you're going to be managing an entire corporation, if you will, as college basketball becomes more and more professionalized.
The Lawson Insurance Group in Raleigh is a family-owned business led by three actual brothers who happen to be huge sports fans: Ken Lawson, Miller Lawson, and Michael Lawson. I know these guys, I trust these guys, and I send these guys my own insurance business and that of my family. The next time you have insurance needs, I hope you'll do the same. The Lawson Insurance Group is known for its commitment to community and its dedication to ensuring that North Carolinians and their businesses are prepared for life's inevitable challenges, with the reminder that as a high street insurance partner, Lawson Insurance Group offers local expertise and support that, combined with High Street's extensive national resources, means more choice and support for you as their client. To learn more, search Lawson Insurance Group online. The Lawson Insurance website will be the first link that pops up. If you are anywhere near Wilmington, North Carolina, and looking for a little live music, a cold beer, a tangy slushie, a fun crowd, or just a taste of the good life at the beach, Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach is the place for you. Located on North Lumina Avenue, just 1 block from the sand and waves of the Atlantic Ocean, Jimmy's features a full bar with nightly beer and drink specials, and it hosts musical performers almost every day of the year. One more fun fact: Jimmy's annual Children's Bike Drive, which started in 2017, now distributes more than 1,000 bicycles and helmets per year to young people in the Wilmington area and beyond. Jimmy's Bar, your home away from home on Lumina Avenue in Wrightsville Beach.
This segment brought to you by our great friends at Atlantic Tire and Service, where DG and his family take all of their vehicles for routine maintenance, service needs, and a world-class selection of new tires. Atlantic Tire and Service, your one-stop tire and auto repair provider with highly trained technicians and a sales and support staff that are second to none. They've grown to 6 Triangle area locations, 2 in Raleigh, 2 in Cary, 1 in Durham, and 1 in Wake Forest. You can learn more online at AtlanticTireOnline.com.
We are at the halfway point of the 2024-25 ACC basketball season. Time for us right here on Timeout to go to the coach and to the scribe and get the top 6 players in the ACC at the midway point of the season. Mike Waddell, Kerry Keating, and the legend David Glenn with you here on the North Carolina Sports Network. And because you're new, Kerry, we're going to give you the first pick in this, I guess, make-believe draft of the top 6 players in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Who you got to go with at number 1, bud?
Well, this is a tough one. It's hard when you're the rookie. You get the first pick in the fantasy draft. You don't want to screw it up, right? You want to take the guy that's going to get the most out of it. But I guess I'll have to go with Cooper Flagg if you're really going to press me for it. Obviously, a guy that not only deserves a mention in this league, but is slowly putting himself in the position to potentially be the National Player of the Year. I think what we saw in this Notre Dame game is a microcosm of exactly what we can see from him throughout the entire season. He just packages it up into one game. Micah Shrewsbury trying to change the defenses up, giving them different looks, maybe even to the point where we'll let other guys beat us. And even when other guys were beating us, he was coming in with the 7 assists. I mean, so impressive to me to have a 42-point game as a freshman while only missing a handful of shots, not taking a high volume of threes, getting to the free throw line at 17 tries for 16 makes. But the 7 assists really stand out to me. And that says enough to me for the player that Cooper can be. And this was the first time that he hit 4 threes, let alone 3 threes in a game where he was facing that scrutiny, if you will, which is easy to do nowadays, that he's not really a shooter. Maybe that's the one knock on a guy that's going to be picked number 1 or 2 in the draft. Kudos to Cooper and obviously John and his staff. And it'd be really, really interesting to see what the rest of the league can come up with to try to slow him down as we head into the postseason coming up here shortly.
David Glenn, you have the second pick in our midseason All-ACC team.
Yeah, this is one of those years where it really hurts to lose the coin flip. Because the Cooper Flagg selection would have been mine and everybody else's as well, obviously. And I want to remind fans, when we pick All-ACC, we're not forecasting professional futures. We're having fun with this, and Mike has structured it as a draft. But if Coach or I were projecting NBA status, this list would be a lot different. I have voted on the official All-ACC teams dozens of times over the years, so just a quick reminder, this is who's helping their college team the most this year. Not a career achievement award, not an NBA forecast. Who deserves credit for what they've accomplished in this first half of the season? So my next pick is going to be Louisville's starting point guard. We raved about Pat Kelsey, the head coach of the Cardinals, earlier. We raved about the team's performance. And to me, that team's performance on the court starts with Chucky Hepburn. Big Ten fans might remember him as a really smart, really hardworking, really reliable player for the Wisconsin Badgers. It's not easy to start as a freshman in major college basketball. Hepburn did it. He was a 3-year starter at Wisconsin, but not really a superstar. Pat Kelsey's system, and Chucky Hepburn's teammates have brought out the best in him. He is averaging a career best 15 points per game. He leads the ACC in steals and is a big part of Louisville's defense. He's top 5 in the ACC as a distributor with about 6 assists per game. So he's keeping all those other transfers happy by being an unselfish distributor, even while averaging 15 points per game. He has about a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio, which is exactly what you need, if not better. He gets to the free throw line a ton. As Coach mentioned earlier, in big games, it's a sign of maturity if you get to the line a lot. Chucky Hepburn does it all the time, and when he gets to the line, he hits almost 85%, which obviously is exactly what the coaching staff wants to see. Whether he's at home or on the road, you can't tell. He is absolutely unflappable, has a high basketball IQ. He's really, really poised. You cannot take the basketball away from him. He is that strong defender. And he's absolutely playing the best basketball of his college career at exactly the right time for the Louisville Cardinals. He's a huge reason that I think they're on their way to being an NCAA tournament team.
And the third pick, Coach Keating?
Well, I'm going to go back to the old West Coast roots while I can, since the West Coast teams want to follow me out here to North Carolina and ACC country. And that's 4-year Stanford center Maxime Renaud, a guy that's leading the conference so far in this early part in points and rebounds. The appreciation I have for a guy like this, David and Mike, is that he's a 4-year player at the same school, which I think is rare enough that if you're in those positions statistically as a 4-year player at the same school, you deserve some merit for even being there, let alone having some success. The big challenge, obviously, for him and his teammates are going to be to see if they can take that long travel, the 2 losses they have on the road, 2 wins back at home. This is something that he's being relied on. He's grown through his 4 years there to statistically improved every year. And now he finds himself in an unbelievable opportunity. He's a foreign player to begin with. Obviously, he's going to have a little bit more of a third eye towards him as far as NBA vision goes. But a guy that can shoot the 3, block shots, obviously rebounds, put the ball in the basket. Making the transition for Stanford a little bit easier this year, although not going to be easy at all. And I'm going to go with Maxime Reynaud as the third player on our mid-season all-conference team.
David, who's your fourth pick?
I'm jealous again because I just like the sound of Maxime Reynaud. My second language is French. Comment allez-vous aujourd'hui? And Maxime Reynaud is from Paris, France. Coach got another really good one there. But you can't argue with 21 points a game and 12 rebounds a game. That's what Reynaud's at. If you lead this league in both of those categories, you will end up on the All-ACC first team. So kudos to Coach as usual. My pick's going to be Pitt's point guard, Jalen Lowe. Coach Jeff Capel has done a really good job of mixing higher profile high school signees with really good major college transfers, which appears to be, one of the magical formulas in modern college basketball. Remember, last year, his star point guard was freshman Bub Carrington, who's now in the NBA with the Washington Wizards. In the same class, he signed Jalen Lowe. And Jalen Lowe, good player last year at Pitt as a freshman, outstanding player this year as a sophomore. He is the engine that has made Pitt an NCAA tournament team and a top 5 team in the ACC. He's averaging about 35 minutes per game, which is among the most in the entire ACC. Top 10 in the ACC in scoring, about 17 points per game. Top 3 in the ACC in assists. So again, he's setting the table for his teammates, about 6 assists per game. Also top 5 in steals with a couple per game. That puts him among the league leaders. He also gets to the free throw line a lot. And when he gets there, he hits about 90% from the charity stripe. 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, extremely physically and mentally tough and durable, just the way Jeff Capel was as a Duke guard back in the day. Again, those 2 point guards I've chosen, Hepburn from Louisville, Lowe from Pitt, they're absolutely central to why those 2 teams are as high in the standings as they are, and that's why they're both on my All-ACC first team.
So we have Flagg from Duke, Hepburn from Louisville, Reynaud from Stanford, Lowe from Pitt. We have 2 spots left on our midseason All-ACC first team. Coach Kerry Keating, who is your third and final addition to the sixth?
We chatted about this in our pre-draft meeting. I actually had a little affinity for the big guys, knowing that Coach Glenn is strictly a point guard coach, which I can appreciate as a head coach because you want to have the coach on the floor. So I can kind of see where David's head's going here. It came to me that as we looked at the standings and looked at just the results in the ACC so far, because obviously at this point in the season, the majority of the games are non-conference, but I wanted just to look at the conference just in general. And a team at 4-1 that's at the top of this conference right now, and we had a discussion about this player, and it just came to me that I think we'd be remiss to not include him on a mid-season all-conference ACC team, is Ian Jackson. And when you go back and look what Ian Jackson has done now think about what Carolina's been. They've played 3 games on the road. On the road. I don't care where you're at. This was the whole thing when I was at UCLA, to a lesser extent when I experienced the Gonzaga effect. When you are hypothetically the game when you go on the road. When they go to SMU, Carolina's coming. When they go to state, obviously it's local, Carolina's coming. Even when you go to Notre Dame, Carolina's coming, right? You're going to get the best shot, not just from the court, but from off the court as well. Those can have profound effects on a freshman, let alone a freshman, as we talked about, with some irrational confidence. Well, I don't want to be too over-irrationally confident here. When you look at Ian Jackson putting up 23, 27, and 21 points on road games alone in his first 4 ACC games, I think the fact that Carolina has overcome where RJ has left them short so far, that it does merit some response that Ian Jackson should and probably deserves to be on any mid-season or even early season ACC all-player team.
And finally, our number 6 pick, David, who's going to put a cap on this mid-season All-ACC first team?
Well, it's interesting the way this has worked out because obviously Duke's atop the standings and Coach went with Cooper Flagg with his first pick. Louisville's high in the standings. I took Chucky Hepburn, their point guard. Carolina's high in the standings. Coach just went with Ian Jackson. Pitt is high in the standings. I had Jalen Lowe earlier. The only high team in the standings that's not represented yet is the Clemson Tigers. And that happens to be my next pick, the star of the Tigers, Chase Hunter. That's another point guard. I know I'm hitting a strong theme here with my 3 picks, but as Coach mentioned, liking Maxime Reynaud as a 4-year player who stayed at the same school for all 4 years, and I share that sentiment personally. Chase Hunter is in his 6th college season, all of them with the Clemson Tigers. Now, that's not why he's an All-ACC pick of mine. I just wanted to point that out as another thing worth admiring about him. But he's become one of the most efficient offensive players in the entire ACC, and he is the number 1 reason. I put Ian Shefflin as the number 2 reason, but Chase Hunter's the number 1 reason that the Clemson Tigers are so high in the ACC standings and have such a strong resume even in their non-conference play. He is sharing the backcourt with the Boston College transfer, Jaden Zachary, this year, and I think that chemistry is bringing out the best basketball of Chase Hunter's 6 years with the Tigers. He's top 10 in the league in scoring, Hunter, 18 points per game, career best. He is shooting, and not many guards, remember, are better than even 40-ish, 45 sometimes percent from the field. Chase Hunter, as a guard, is over 50% from the field and over 90% from the free throw line. He is also leading the ACC in three-point percentage at 45%. What was that? Coach Keating, Coach Larinaga, and others always used to talk about that. What is it? The 40-50-90 club, I think.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Chase Hunter's living, breathing that incredibly high efficiency production. Not only, 40, 50, 90 plus percent from the free throw line, 45% from 3, 50 plus percent. He's also unselfish. He can pass the ball. He shares those point guard duties, but he's a good assist man as well. He has really, you want to talk about what college basketball used to be all about? Watch Chase Hunter year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you will see something he's better at in each of the 6 years. It's truly a beautiful picture that I think whether you're an old school basketball fan or a modern casual basketball fan, I think it can be appreciated and celebrated. So I've got Chase Hunter. We're going to have plenty of good ball handlers on this All-ACC squad. I've got Chase Hunter of Clemson as my final pick in this fun draft.
One name that is not on that list is R.J. Davis. David, a few years ago, it was Garrison Brooks that was the preseason ACC Player of the Year for North Carolina, who did not have the senior season that people projected him to have. Do you think that same fate is coming in for R.J. Davis here? And, Coach, after David weighs in, I'd like you to chip in as well.
Yeah, time will tell, Mike. It's hard to know. I mentioned the chemistry among the UNC guards a little while ago. And that's going to be important, right? It just they have to find a way to work better together. Last year, when RJ put together that ACC Player of the Year, first team All-American season, we saw the contrast between RJ on the court with Elliot Cadeau, RJ on the court without Elliot Cadeau. So it was not mere coincidence that his with Cadeau numbers were phenomenally better. 3-point shooting percentage, 2-point shooting percentage, all of his efficiency numbers just way better with Elliot Cadeau out there. Why? Well, RJ had some of the ball handling duties taken off of his shoulder. RJ had a true point guard feeding him the ball where he likes it. RJ, of course, last year also had Armando Bacot down low, taking a lot of the pressure off of him. RJ is still an All-ACC candidate. I don't want anybody to be misled here. There's 15 slots on the All-ACC team, and of course, he would be on our 15-man team. He'd probably be on my second-man team. Hunter Salas of Wake Forest is another guy that did not make our first 6 picks. He's absolutely, positively an All-ACC player. And if someone put Hunter or RJ in their top 6, it's not like you're crazy. But RJ's numbers are so dramatically far down right now. He's just not at all an efficient basketball player. He still has a good assist-to-turnover ratio. He's still an excellent free throw shooter. But man, he's below 30% from three-point land, and that just has to change. Maybe it's chemistry related. Maybe RJ has lost some of his confidence. Maybe psychology is coming into play here. But RJ Davis, you knew he was not going to be able to shoot quite as well without Bacot protecting him. But to go from 40% almost three-point shooter to 28%. that's a catastrophic fall. There's still time to change that around. But again, R.J. Davis is an All-ACC player. He's just not the elite player that he was at Carolina a year ago. And as Coach nominated Ian Jackson earlier, there are some coaches and fans and players that would tell you that R.J. Davis is not even the best player on his own team right now, much less one of the best players in America.
If you're looking at numbers and stats and don't have the ability to watch every single Carolina game, three things stand out to me as far as RJ is concerned. And obviously we know about his prowess as far back as last year, first team All-American, obviously now coming back for another year at Carolina, which everybody, celebrated for a lot of different reasons. Cooper Flagg, as we mentioned, just shot 17 free throws and scoring 42 points, made 16 of them. RJ has only shot more than 7 free throws in a game on 3 occasions. And in those 3 occasions, he scored 26, 29, and 30 points. It is not a coincidence. He's an attacking guard. Yes, he can make shots. Yes, he's got a propensity. But there's something I think that Hubert needs to unlock here is you can't make a guy go to the free throw line. You can't make the other team necessarily, foul you, but you can put them in positions. We talked about this earlier. This is, I think, a little bit where RJ is suffering from not having the traditional cadre of 4 and 5 men, or even just 2 big 5 men at his disposal to set screens for him, to rebound, to kick out, to put pressure on, defenses attacking the basket where RJ can kind of go off backs and get to the lane. I think if you're going to be RJ Davis and have a bump up in your success and your efficiency, it's going to have to start at the free throw line. How am I going to get myself to the free throw line? There's a lot of things that come from that as a coach. One, it's the only shot in the game that is the same no matter what, where, when, or how. Just the circumstances change. But if you're a good shooter, those circumstances don't affect you at all. You can control that more than anything else. I think the impetus is on Hubert and staff to figure out how can we get RJ in more of an attacking position to put more pressure on the defense against us. This should, in theory, turn him into more of a traditional point guard to maybe get Ian some shots, to get some of those dump offs to Washington at the rim, to kind of free up Cadeau, to get downhill off secondary drives. I think they kind of got to get back to put a focus on RJ being in an attack mode. And look, NC State game is what it is. It's the first time all season outside of the Auburn game, which obviously they lost, and he was 1 for 1. He shot no free throws against an NC State team that can be erratic and physical. It wasn't like, it was an up and down game. It wasn't like it was this free flowing NBA game with 75 threes in it. It was a pretty physical game by all accounts. He shot no free throws. I think that's the first place you start if you're Hubert having a conversation with RJ is we got to get you back to the line. It puts points on the board. It builds confidence for you. It helps our team. And by and large, it puts the other guys in a position where now they can feed off of you as we've done so much in the past. So a lot to unpack there if you're RJ. And you never really know what else is going on, especially in this day and age. All the factors that can come in. And I would think RJ being a fifth-year guy and having gone through and seen what Baycott did last year, what he's doing now in terms of exterior activities, that he can balance them properly and efficiently so that it doesn't cost the heels. But they're still in a good position, still 4-1, still have a chance to make the tournament. But a lot of it's going to be predicated on whether RJ can take this re-step back up that we're accustomed to seeing him do so often.
We've talked about Duke's big win over Notre Dame, North Carolina's local win by 2 on the road at NC State, giving you our ACC midseason Coach of the Year and first team All-ACC selections. And now we'll close it out with a look to women's basketball, guys. Over the weekend, it was Pitt and SMU. Normally not something we talk about here on the North Carolina Sports Network, but in this game, the Panthers were down by 32 points in the first half and down 31 at halftime. I don't want to know what that halftime talk was, or maybe I do, because Pitt comes back in the largest comeback in NCAA women's basketball history to not only beat SMU, but to beat the Mustangs 72-59. They were down by 31 and they win by 13. Coach, that's a hell of a halftime talk.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I wouldn't want to be the coach at SMU right now because you're up 46-14 with 11 minutes to go in the game. I mean, like I saw a thing where the golfer that won this weekend, the Canadian guy that won this weekend, was on the 18th tee with a .04 chance of winning the tournament. Like, so they have those live odds going on, right? He ended up eagling 18 and winning in a playoff. I want to know what the odds were at 11:37 left in the game, or 1:37 in the third quarter, if you will, with the women's game, up 46-14, and then proceed to have a completely different game happen when it goes 58-13 the other way. I don't care what level you're at, high school, middle school, college, pro. I've never seen or heard anything like that. I double took that this morning when I was with my son. I said, we may need to go back and just watch that. I'm just curious what happens. And was this just a crazy? I haven't even looked at the stats yet. I just saw the score, but I can't wait to go back and peek into and dig into how this happened, because it's just something that, from a coaching standpoint, is absolutely amazing and unprecedented.
Yeah, Mike, what jumped out to me, and again, I didn't see all the details. I need to go back and look at this as well. But my understanding was that this was a 49-18 lead for SMU at the half. 49-18. And remember, Pitt's women's team is not an elite team this year. But the Panthers were at home. And I remember as a young athlete myself, man, when you're at home, if you're trailing, it's just a little different than being on the road. If you're getting killed on the road, you just might have that, I guess it's just not our night feeling. At home, you're going to double down your efforts because you don't want to be embarrassed back then, whether it's in front of your mom, your dad, your best buddies, or whatever. At home, you are never, ever, ever going to let go of the rope, as that old saying goes. So you're down 49-18 at the half. I believe the box score said that Pitt outscored SMU in the third quarter, as Coach mentioned. Women's hoops at college level has quarters. 28-0. I mean, that looks like an AFC championship game or something. 28-0 Panthers over Mustangs in the third quarter, which obviously made it a game going into the fourth. I've never seen anything like that. So I knew it had to make a record of some sort, and probably multiple records, but credit to the Pitt women for not giving up and for keep fighting. And I don't have an explanation for how it happened, but that is one of the craziest stories of the college basketball season so far.
Hey, Mike, I'll say this. It's a good thing Mick Cronin's not coaching the women at SMU, or we might be having a whole show about that press conference.
No, we'll leave some Mick commentary to another day, but I can tell you, as you and I have discussed before, there was one Big East tournament game where we were down at the half, and I could hear him at the center court scores table from inside the locker room at the old mid-court locker rooms at MSG. Mick can get a little loud, but congrats to the Pitt Panthers on their big NCAA all-time record comeback win over SMU. Pitt and SMU and women's basketball in the ACC, only here in 2025. We invite you to like and subscribe us here on YouTube, closing in on 30,000 subscribers. You can follow us online at our outstanding website, where DG is constantly populating the site with brand new original content at ncsportsnetwork.com, and follow us on social media at the NC Sports Net. For Coach Kerry Keating and David Glenn, I'm Mike Waddell, thanking you for tuning in to another edition of the Tobacco Road Basketball Show, known as Timeout on the North Carolina Sports Network.